Hi guys, and welcome to another Sailing Nondes video. In this week's episode, we discuss our key learnings from our first ocean crossing. Let's get to it! Squeeze in. Oh god.
Dad, you really are squeezed in there.
Yep. Hello! Okay.
Hey guys! So we've made it across Biscay. Yay!
Woo!
Woo! Which is some, it's water with a bad reputation. It's an ocean with bad reputation. So it feels like a really big achievement for us to have crossed it. And it's also kind of crazy because that's our first, it's my first ocean crossing, and it's Nondes's first ocean crossing with us as her owners. And it's your first ocean crossing being the captain. So It's a really big achievement that we're very proud of ourselves for. But being the newbies that we are, there's probably quite a few lessons, or there are quite a few lessons that we learned along the 4 or 5 days that we were at sea, that I think are really important that we're going to take forward and that we thought we'd share with you guys now. So we were given loads of advice from everyone that we met. Everyone had a piece of advice for us, but I feel like there were some things that were maybe just so obvious that no one thought to mention it. Because if you're an experienced sailor, if you're an experienced sailor, I can't say that.
If you're an experienced sailor,
you probably don't even think about it. It's like second nature. But for us, there were definitely some things that probably are now really obvious, but we just didn't do. So we thought we'd share them with you.
So number one is prep the night before, and that means the more prep you do, the better stead you'll find yourself in later on. So we did some cooking before we left, some food prep, but then the flaw in that was that Flick did all of the food prep. Flick suffered really badly on the first sort of 36 hours, day and a half, with seasickness. And basically wasn't that keen on talking to anybody.
I just couldn't communicate at all, so I was just sitting in the corner of the cockpit for I don't know, probably about 12 hours or something, and people would ask me questions and I'd just be like, yeah, no, it's there, yeah, go. There was nothing, I couldn't get any words out, and just stared at the horizon, so everyone felt a bit I guess nervous trying to talk to me. Yeah. So but because of that, I'd done my mum came down from Wales and we did a really big food shop, which was so good, and we had such a well-stocked fridge for the passage. I had everyone nutritionally balanced meals and things all sorted, prepped, so all they had to do was put them in the oven really, but no one knew what they were, what the plan was, how they had to cook them or anything, and I couldn't communicate it, and I couldn't look to go and help. That was just totally ruled out for the whole crossing. I think we had some emergency meals pot noodles and things like that the guys ended up having, yeah. But it wasn't the nutritionally balanced vision that I had.
Other prep to do is do your engine checks. If you're going to stow an early morning start, do your engine checks the night before. It's just one less job to do. So check your oil, check your coolant, check the alternator belts tight, and it's one less thing to worry about in the morning and one less thing to worry about whilst you're underway.
But there's obviously things that you can't do the night before. So stuff that we were really bad at for Biscay was everyone said to us, have breakfast before you go because you'll need the energy for the journey. And we were yeah, it'll be fine. I had granola and yogurt and fruit and things like that. So I was we can just make it as we're leaving Falmouth. No, we went straight out, as Joe said, straight out into this really big seas, and there was no chance of making any breakfast down below, particularly as new people having to navigate a boat doing this. So yeah, we had no food when we left. I think you had an apple or something, which then
I had one apple, yeah, which I puked up half an hour later.
And then my other thing,
we didn't take our seasickness tablets.
No, so. The other thing I was going to say is so for example, knowing what I know now, what I probably should have done is we were leaving at 6. Did we leave at 6?
Yeah.
We left at 6. For the seasickness tablets that we've got from England, for them to work, you have to take them 2 hours before you start your passage. So I should have just set my alarm for 4, had the tablets right by my bed, just had a sip of water and had the tablet and gone back to sleep. And then I'd have woken up and have had some form of base, I don't know, resistance, if they work, to the seasickness. So that's a good lesson, is just, this sounds so obvious, and I'm sure people did say to us, like, make sure that you eat, make sure that you take your seasickness tablets early, but we just didn't. So here's us reiterating it to you guys. Take your seasickness tablets early, have some breakfast. And then the other thing is you're at four-ish days at sea, and it gets quite boring. So everyone was like, download stuff, have stuff in advance, like ready, podcasts, Netflix, whatever. I did that on our way between Plymouth and Falmouth because I forgot to do it in the marina, which meant I used my data to download it, which meant I used a lot of data in that like little trip. So just a little side note, like, download stuff while you've got Wi-Fi, go to a cafe, go to a pub, anything like that, download stuff to preempt it, because otherwise you're going to use all your data up.
Okay, so on to a second main point, just stowing stuff away. Just make sure everything is stowed away, like actually stowed away, everything, like anything that could potentially fall over or fall out of its home, make sure it's put away, secured in place, nothing can come flying out as you start getting out into sea. We left at 6 in the morning. We sort of woke up, started the engine, lifted the anchor, and sort of left Falmouth straight away. We hadn't really stowed everything away before we went to bed the night before. And we didn't really think much of it because when we left Falmouth, it was this beautiful sunrise with really flat seas. But as soon as we got out of the Falmouth estuary, it was like all hell broke loose. Like, we had the problem with the mainsail ripping out the mast, but all whilst that was going on, stuff downstairs was flying everywhere.
And we had, like, we'd done the obvious stowing of stuff, like we had big pieces of netting here to protect everything in the boat, we'd put away everything, like the obvious things were sorted, but it was stuff that we just hadn't really thought about. Like, we've got a utensil spinner that went flying around the boat, we had some water that was out, like that went flying around,
And a jug of water.
Yeah, a Brita filter jug, spill that everywhere. Yeah, so it was kind of a bit of carnage for the first like half an hour of sailing, just trying to like clear up that mess. I mean, I didn't even see it, I was on deck.
Yeah, you just got to be super strict, make sure everything is stowed away, like literally everything, because if there is any possibility for it to go flying, it just will. Okay, so on to the third key lesson, which is calm seas at anchor do not mean calm seas at sea. So we left this beautiful anchorage in Falmouth, up the Falmouth estuary at 6 in the morning, and we had a beautiful sunrise. There wasn't really a drop of wind, but we got out our full sort of canvas of sail, no swell, nothing.
It was like
and as
heaven.
soon as we got out of the estuary, it was like boom. It was like 20 knots, and it was like probably 2 meter, 2.5, maybe up to 3 meter waves, and they were coming sort of across the boat. The waves from that direction was forecasted, but the size of the waves was larger, like quite a lot larger than forecasted. And this sort of leads on to the point beforehand, which on stowing, is that just don't make the assumption that because it's calm in your anchorage, it's going to be calm at sea.
Or that you've got time. Like, I think we thought, oh, we're going to go into these waves, but it will take us a while to get there. Like, again, for other people it might sound really obvious, but we just didn't realise how quickly the sea would change, like, as we progressed in our journey. It was literally like we went from this like really gentle roll in as we were coming out of the estuary to suddenly being like, whoa, like being thrown around.
And being properly like thrown around. Yeah. It wasn't fun. They were sort of coming right across the side, big waves, really close together, like choppy, wasn't very nice.
Yeah,
properly thrown around sideways.
Which brings us on to another point related to that, but a separate one, I guess, which is study the waves. People have told us since this trip that I think it's French sailors, someone told us that French sailors sail by wave forecast rather than by wind, which I think can't be totally true, but there's a lot to be said by relying on the wave forecast actually as much as the wind forecast. The mistake, I guess, that we made is we relied really heavily on the forecast being accurate, which it's not always. I think we've had some experiences since then where the forecast has predicted like a 4-meter swell, which in my head I'm like, whoa, that's massive. But then when you look at the weather data coming in from the weather boys or weather system things that are out in the sea, they're actually measuring like a 7 or an 8-meter swell. So don't just look at the height and the direction, look at the distance between the waves and how long it's taking for each wave to come through. I think it's between each peak, isn't it, of the wave?
We were just looking at wave height mainly, and then the direction. Like looking at hopefully the waves are behind us or almost behind us, so then it's surfing and boat won't be too much rocking and we won't be slamming into waves. And we looked at the wave height to see how big they were. But we didn't ever think to look at the wave period. But if they're really close together, it creates these choppy seas that like throw the boat around a lot more than if the waves are exactly the same height but really spread out. If the waves are really spread out, the wave period, then the boat just sort of gently rolls over them, and it's kind of just really calm and almost really peaceful.
Nice, yeah.
But if they're close together, it just like really chucks you around. It's not fun.
Because we found that our boat was being pushed up like this, and it was just throwing the boat like this, and then suddenly you'd be like on your way down the other side of it, and then the next wave would be picking you up already. So the boat would be trying to be at this angle, and then the other wave would like come over the side sometimes, and then you'd be like thrown back to the other side. So it was just really uncomfortable, and a really good lesson that we've been able to bring forward into future passages gradually.
Yeah.
The thing that also is we'll make these summaries from a passage and be like, yeah, we've learned that lesson now, won't make that mistake again. And then like 2 weeks later, make the same mistake again.
No, I don't want to say we're making the same mistake. We're just learning different things. Like for a while we were worried about wave height, and then we realised that wave height doesn't matter, it depends on the direction.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, fine. So we saw a forecast with like small waves but really small period, so we were like, oh yeah, that looks dreamy, because we weren't caring about the period, we were just caring about wave height and wave direction. So then we went out for a sail with tiny waves but also tiny period, and we just got chucked around like a little washing machine, and it was horrible. So it's not making the same mistakes, it's just learning a new lesson but on the same subject.
I'm making the same mistakes when it comes to seasickness,
because
I do keep forgetting to take my seasickness tablets. So I just need to keep repeating to myself every time I feel sick. Well, you only have yourself to blame, Felicity, because you could have fixed this.
Yeah, and then I spend basically the rest of the passage just looking after you whilst you lie in bed.
Works quite well for me, really.
So, on to point number 4, which is, we think if you're going to go on your first sort of big ocean crossing, take some crew. They don't even have to be particularly experienced crew. It's just so much more helpful to have another hand on the boat. It just helps in so many ways. For example, if Flick is incapacitated or I'm incapacitated because I'm feeling seasick, then instantly you're sort of down to single-handing the boat, which it just makes things a lot harder, especially if you start to run into any sort of problems like the autopilot fails, then all of a sudden you're at one person and you're stuck on the helm, like you can't do anything else with the boat. We had our American friend Greg join us, and he was so helpful on passage. He'd not really had much boat experience at all, but he was great to have on board. He was totally immune to seasickness, which was a total coincidence and not planned. But
it was dreamy.
Flick and I I was being sick over the edge. Flick was sort of in bed feeling very sick, and Greg was just like down below making coffee, making meals, reading a book on the sofa, and he didn't feel seasick at all whilst the boat's going all over the place. So he was great to have on board. But the main other thing, the advantage of having crew on board is your night shifts or your shifts when you're on watch, because if it was just Flick and I, it'd be something like 2 hours on and 2 hours off. So I'd have to do 2 hours on watch overnight, and then I'd get 2 hours of sleep. But with having one extra person on board, all of a sudden it's 2 hours on watch and you get 4 hours off. So you get 4 hours to go and warm up or go get some food and a drink and catch up on some sleep. And that makes a big difference, having that extra time to go and sleep.
Yeah, it was so good. I'm so glad that we had Greg with us. Like, he's a hero. Very, very pleased. He was even like, when we spilt all the Brita filter water downstairs, he was able to go downstairs and clear it up. Whereas I think if it had just been us, that would have been there for like...
We just left
the day.
Maybe we couldn't go down to clear up the water that spilled everywhere because we'd have just been sick trying to clear it up. So we just like left it. But Greg just went down and did it. For the first 36 hours, he just sort of was down below and he prepared meals for us and just passed them up to us whilst we sort of like sat there and tried to survive the seasickness.
You recovered quite quickly.
I was sick, but then I'd immediately feel fine.
Yeah, whereas I just wasn't sick, so I felt sick for 4 days.
Point number 5.
Yeah. Point number 5. Trust the boat.
Everyone says this, but then we're just sort of reiterating it. So I guess this isn't a new point, but yeah, the boat can handle so much more than you think it can, and it'll be you as people who break through seasickness or morale way before the boat fails you. And I think that's what Biscay taught you, isn't it? Like, you were quite scared of like all the boats don't want to be able to handle these conditions, or
Yeah.
and the boat's absolutely fine. Like, it could handle so much worse. Like, people
Yeah.
go through massive storms and all
Yeah.
sorts in boats.
She was amazing, even just with the head sail up. Like, she was able to get us, like, basically drive us the whole way across Biscay with just one sail up. And it was like the head sail, and so therefore I thought that would mean that the boat would be, like, I don't know, a lot harder to manoeuvre because it would be pushing at the wrong angle or whatever. But she was an absolute dream. She was fine. And it was really funny as well. Like, that's my first time being in really big seas, and so I was constantly like, oh my god, the boat's gonna fall over, we're gonna capsize, like, something's gonna happen. But every wave, even though we were being thrown around, she was fine. She would just go up it, and then she'd, like, flop back down the other side, but she was fine. So it was just really nice, like, seeing that she could go through a lot more than we put her through on that week. Final point.
Yeah, the sixth point, which is just be adaptable. Like, be prepared to change your plan if it's required of you. So we were trying to sail straight from Falmouth to A Coruña. A Coruña is sort of on the northwest tip of Spain. But the way the wind direction was for us the last, like, 2 days of the trip, or last day and a half, it meant that to get to A Coruña, we'd have had to, like, beat up wind for that entire time. So we just sort of made the call. And the other thing is that we would have arrived at A Coruña in darkness, and we didn't want to arrive to an unfamiliar place, like an unfamiliar marina, in the middle of, like, darkness, in the middle of the night. Because it's just harder to see fishing buoys, any hazards, rocks, anything. So we made the decision to just go directly south from the position we were at, which is, I can't remember what it was called, but it was a small little fishing village.
It was so pretty.
We just looked at it navally. It had good reviews for an anchorage, and we just beelined it straight to basically the nearest coastline, and just anchored there for the night. And we had a beautiful little, like, sunset. Really calm anchorage. We did a little dog walk for Walter.
Able to have a shower on the boat.
Have a shower, and just had dinner, and we could sort of get to bed and catch up on sleep as well at a normal time.
Yeah, it was so good. But I think as part of the whole being adaptable thing, I think that follows out of the passage and into, like, how that then will impact your continued journey. So, for example, for us, our initial plan when we bought Nondes, our plan was we were going to do her up over the summer, take her over to Spain, Portugal, and then sail down to the Canaries and do the Caribbean for winter. That was, like, the goal, was to be in the Caribbean for December. But we did Biscay, and I think it just, like, showed us that actually, we got to Spain and it was beautiful, and we were like, we could stay here, like, this is nice. We don't need to get to the Caribbean to find beautiful places, like, Europe will be amazing. And then also we've got a dog, we've got Walter, who we have always thought, as soon as we knew that we wanted to do
we always said we got a dog, and a dog is not just for Christmas. So if we're going to do the boat thing, we have to always be fair to Walter. And after doing Biscay, which is sort of really his first time in any sort of big seas, and yours, he definitely didn't enjoy, like, the first, like, 24 hours or so, because it's like wooden floors in here. He just slips and slides around, and he was just sort of bed bound. He was either in our bed or in the cockpit, like, lying on one of the sofa cushions up there, and he just sort of chill for a long time. I don't think he had much fun the first 24 hours or so.
It was just mainly, like, that first day that we were
struggled
like,
to get him
this
to
is
eat
really
as
unfair
well.
for him. Yeah, we had to get, I think Greg actually did it, he went up with the lifelines, like, clipped in, went up on deck in, like, the nasty weather, and got Walter's, like, AstroTurf. The sea had calmed down a little bit by this point, but he got Walter's AstroTurf and brought it into the cockpit, so then Walter could use the loo in the cockpit and go, do his business there, and then we'd wash it down. But we've changed our plan to factor in the fact that Walter probably wouldn't be up for doing really big crossing. And the other thing is, when you get him there, you then have to get him back, and that's, like,
we one day have to get him back. Yeah, so if we get
itself.
him across there, and it
It's
was
awful.
an awful experience for him and for everyone else, then it's just really hard to then at some point put him back through that. because we have to get
Yeah.
him back to the UK at some point. Obviously, we can fly him and things like that, but flying will be equally traumatic for Walter.
If anyone watching has any experience of Vizslas, you might have heard of the term Velcro dog, and that's like exactly what Walter is. He's so attached to being around us, but also being around like humans in general.
So yeah, Europe is our current plan, and we're just going to take it as it comes, basically, aren't we?
Yeah, we're going to go to Morocco
Go
for
into the
winter because of the Schengen rules, and then we're going to go into the Med and explore the Med and do lots of like day hops around a couple of like maybe 2-day, 3-day passages, we'll see, and just see how we go, and then maybe in a year's time we can consider like whether Walter's adapted, whether I've adapted, and
But he's already a ton more like used to being on a boat now,
oh yeah,
isn't he?
he's actually such a
Like,
dream.
if we're at
now.
Passage now, he'll actually, in like swells, he'll put his feet over the edge. He'll try and go along the decks, and you have to tell him no, you're not allowed on deck, not whilst it's like swelly.
If it's swelly, we'll clip.
But-
and don't worry, he's always wearing a life jacket,
Yeah.
so you don't need to worry about that. Yeah, those are our like key lessons. So to summarise, we would say prep the day before.
The more prep you do, the better.
Yeah, stow everything away really, really well
Kind of covered under prep, but we put it at its own point
because it's so
because
important.
it's just so because we've made the mistake. We have made this mistake multiple times. Is we don't stow everything away, and we always regret it because stuff goes flying. Either stuff gets damaged or broken, or it's just a mess. Like stuff, it's just not fun to deal with the aftermath of like a jug of water flying everywhere, or like someone spilling coffee or tea or whatever. Like it's just not fun.
Yeah.
Calm seas at anchor do not mean calm seas at sea.
Have a crew, trust in your boat, and be adaptable.
Yeah, but let us know what other lessons you've learned being on Passage. What are the things that you would share with us or share with other people that you think are sort of must-have lessons for somebody on their first ocean passage? Because we're trying to come at an angle here where it's for people who, if you have, like us, like very limited experience of doing big passages, like what are those things that often get overlooked because somebody else is so experienced and has done it so many times they don't even think about it. Sit down. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. Please don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And of course, drop us a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you like to see more or less of? Wait, why don't we give him a kiss when he's time?